So thank you for coming to my presentation. This is not a presentation. It's really a deeply personal story about transition. It is my story. And 20 years ago, 20 years ago, I graduated from University of Southern California, and I got a job at this very promising marquee startup that was started by MIT and Berkeley professors. Things were great, and within 18 months, we got sold for $1 billion or more dollars. I was a paper millionaire, and I thought, startups are easy and life was going to be good. But immediately after that, a few things happened. Actually, three things happened. One is that very early in my career, I had moved into, from being an engineer, I was hired as a software engineer. I moved into product management, and I worked for the senior director of product strategy. I loved my work. It was really great. But very soon, when we got acquired, the new company, the acquiring company, wanted to understand who was where. And because in the small setup where everybody knew everybody else, there wasn't a real clear transition like in the org chart that had happened. I was a software engineer, and I started working in product, and nobody really cared. But when we got acquired, people wanted to know where the headcount was, who's where. So within 18 months, I had 6-8 months of engineering, and then 6-8 months of product. I had just graduated from school, and now I was in a situation where I had no experience in either really, and I was strictly in the engineering org as far as the acquiring company is concerned. And the second thing that happened is it was 2000, 2001, and from this high of acquisition where everything looked great and stock price was going up, very quickly the whole market tanked. And the startup that I was in the content delivery network. So if everybody is familiar with Akamai and CDNs, Akamai is still standing, but every other startup, there were 20 of them in 2000 and a couple remained after that. So not only could I, with my skills and experience, not stay in my company, but there were no other companies that were looking for people like me who had that kind of skill set. So this was a pretty tough situation to be in, but finally there's something else that happened. I was on an H-1B visa for those who don't know. In the U.S. to work, if you're a student, an international student, you need an H-1B visa, and I was on that. And there are some nuances about the visa, which is that every few years you have to go out of the country and get it stamped and stuff. I was scheduled to go to outside of the U.S. on 13 September 2001. I had my flight booked. Everything was going to be okay. And something happened on September 11th, 2001. That created this situation like never before, where there was complete lockdown, there was complete scrutiny on student visa holders and transitions and stuff. So I had this trifecta of situations that happened within not even 2 years of my graduating from college and getting into the situation. And from there, transition is possible, so all I'm saying is that there is hope. Everybody believes that they are, they are in a certain situation and they want to move to another situation, and it's a pretty tough situation. It's a tough problem for them because it's, the manager is not, accommodating, the company culture is such. But what I'm here to, tell you guys that it's possible to transition and there is hope. So after that, situation. I've been in 12 years in product management. I've been in Silicon Valley most of my life, 20 years or so. I've spent 5 years at Adobe on the Photoshop and Creative Cloud products. I was on the Yahoo front page product management team. I was at Evernote, and for the last year, I am co-founder of a machine learning startup called Growth AI. So Growth AI, just a little bit, we are a B2B SaaS subscriber churn prediction company, obviously based on machine learning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about transition frameworks. So over the years, I have mentored a whole bunch of people, product managers in these different companies, a lot of software engineers that I've worked with, and I've also taught product management. I run workshops, one that I ran on Sunday here. So I'm going to talk to you about a transition framework, specifically to transition from different roles into product management. And I'm going to talk about something what I call Rocketship product management. So here we go. So before we begin, one of the things is that product management in Silicon Valley and around the world is exploding. The whole role has become much more central for a number of reasons. One is, the famous saying by Mark Reeson, software is eating the world. So no matter which company or which stream you're in, whether you're in aeronautical, or you're in, agriculture, it's finally all coming down to doing something with computers. And fascinating things are happening around the world, and everything is becoming a software business. So product management, is central to that. The second thing is that making things has become really, really much, much easier. AWS and GCP are all over the place. They're accessed anywhere by anybody, and it's, there is so much information available that to connect these things has become easy. It's also become harder for single companies to dominate around the world. So Uber recently got out of, not recently, but they got out of Southeast Asia, other places, unlike 20 years ago where, Microsoft and Cisco had a hold on, the deployment and the supply chain and everything else. It's become much more harder for a single company based in one place to dominate around the world, because a big reason for that is that customers have become hyper-aware. They want something to be built for local tastes. They want something that works for them. They are not satisfied. There is so much awareness. They know what is available, and they want something that's personalized. And all of that leads to the fact that you need product managers to understand customers and build products for those local tastes. I like to say that this is like, probably even, Italian Renaissance on steroids. Recently, I was talking to a VC, and they invested in this company. You should look it up. Relativity Space. They are making rockets by 3D printing, and they believe that instead of rockets taking years to build, it'll take days to build them. So, fascinating things are being developed, and it's just it's a time where around the world, if you can imagine it, you can build it. What has also happened because of this, the fact that there is much easier to build stuff, is that competition is fierce. If you just look at the MarTech landscape, in 2011, where there were 100 or so, 150 companies, then it went to 350 companies, and 2014, 1,000 companies, 2,000 companies. Anybody wants to guess how many companies we had in 2016 in just MarTech? 20,000? It's 3,500. And innovation is in every sector. If you look at, agriculture tech, there are probably 100 companies down there. If you look at, trucking, there are another 100 startups. And everything has got to do with something to do with software. So there is no sector out there that, if you're passionate about, that there's not something happening. And by 2018, anybody wants to guess how many companies there are just in MarTech? It's actually 7,000. They call it 5,000, but if for ease of marketing, but it's actually 7,000 companies. The other thing that's happening is what is being called micro SaaS. So if you have a big company like Zendesk, which is a unicorn, and they have more than $1 billion valuation, a lot of people are targeting certain workflows in these big companies. So this is an example where a bunch of companies like Front and Customer are focused on one of the workflows that Zendesk does. And that has increased competition on folks who had established brands. 20 years ago, if you were at Microsoft or Cisco or any of these big companies like Motorola, Intel, you were pretty comfortable. But now, even if you are established, you are under threat. And the other thing that's happening is that to acquire these customers, all these companies are trying to get to these customers on the main, on 3 or 4 different channels, which has created such an explosion of information and thing notifications and emails coming to you as a consumer, that it's become much harder to figure out what your go-to market is. And that all boils down to product management as a field, as a place where it has become central to most companies. And you've heard the phrase that the CEO is the product manager, or the CEO of the product. But this is not entirely true. At least ever since I've heard about this, it's really never, having been a product manager, it's never resonated that much with me for a couple of reasons. One is, like other people have said, you don't have direct authority. The other is that there is never a clean slate situation when you get hired as a product manager. There is always somebody else doing the job before you get hired. Mostly your hiring manager or the director of product or VP is probably doing the job before you get hired, especially if you are transitioning into their role, or the engineering manager is doing the role. Somebody else is making decisions, and you have to very quickly figure out how to get people to people to listen to you. You become that person that people talk to, versus going around you. And you have to break that habit, but people are habituated, your engineering team, your executives, to go to a certain person for making that decisions, and you have to insert yourself into that pre-existing habit. So it's a much difficult transition to get into in this role. And the other unsaid part about this statement is that even though you might be the CEO of the product and you want to be that person, if you aren't prepared for it, you might not have your job pretty soon, because it's a leadership job where you're under a lot of scrutiny and you have other factors at play. So what I'm going to talk about is I've distilled over the last 10-15 years a few things that work, and hopefully that's useful. But before we begin, there are just talking a little bit more about the three types of product manager roles. The first one is an enterprise PM. So if you are an engineer or have any kind of technical background, one of the easiest ways for you to move into is a technical PM role, where there is a lot of integration work. You are in a big company where there is a lot of support available in terms of program management, engineering management. Typically companies that are big, like maybe Ericsson and others, where there are multi-year projects that need to be put together, and they need some amount of customer discovery, some amount of execution. Those are really good roles to get into. When people say they want to be product managers, mostly they mean that they want to be consumer PMs, which is that they want to work for Google and Facebook and understand how consumers behave. And that kind of role is extremely tough. And many of these companies where you have these consumer PM roles, they have, you run the entire team. Like famously at Facebook, if you join as a product manager, for the first 6 weeks, there is some boot camp that you have to go through. And after that, you have to come up with an idea and convince people to work on that idea. If you can't convince 3 or 4 engineers to work on that idea, you don't have a team. And like in a few months, you may not be there. So you're running all aspects of the team, and that's a tough proposition. And you need to be prepared for that kind of role. It's not a job where a certain amount of things on your resume will get you there, because there are a lot of intangibles. And the third type of role is a product strategy role. So typically, when you establish yourself as either a enterprise PM or a consumer PM, you've had some successes, you eventually graduate where you are responsible for understanding the competition, the go-to-market, team building, hiring product managers becomes very essential to be successful as that kind of role. The easiest, like I said, would be number one, especially if you are technical oriented, because you can you can make a case that you know half the job already. If you are domain specific, like if you want, if you're probably not technical, but you're in customer success or pre-sales or sales integration, or any other role that allows you to be very close to customers, where you understand how they operate, what they do, what the market is around. Consumer PM is the way to go. You can get into those roles because you come in with a perspective that not too many people on that team have. And the final role, which is the graduating role, in both of these situations would be the product strategy role. But unless you prove yourself in terms of identifying and building something, chances are you won't, get to the next level. So before I talk about how to transition, there are some challenges that you need to be aware of about getting into the product role. And one of the first things is that if you are in an existing team, for example, at a big company and you become an enterprise PM, I use a strong word here, attacks from engineering. But if you have a really strong, engineering leader, or God forbid, if both you and the engineering manager are both reporting to the same VP of engineering, that's a very dicey situation to be, because if you are limited to the input that you are getting from the engineering team, and you don't have any source of getting customer input or data or anything around that, then it's your word against your engineering manager, who probably has been doing that job for a long time, and they know how the thing works, and they already have an idea. Most engineering teams already have an idea what they're going to do next, because there is engineering momentum, and there's certain things that couldn't get done, and that automatically become the thing that they want to do next. So there is a very high chance that you'll get pushback from engineering around what you want to do. The second thing is, if this starts to happen, there'll be frowns from leadership, where your articulation, your communication, your how clearly you're representing what needs to be built will come into question. You might even get some feedback on your team leadership skills or your communication skills need to be addressed. The other thing that happens is misalignment between you and your manager. If your manager, as a product manager, or your skip level managers, don't take your meetings, or the one-on-ones get rescheduled, that means that you're working on a product that is not very core to your boss. And if that is happening, you are misaligned from your basically your engineering, your chain of command, and that can be a problem. And it is upon you to figure that out and align yourself, because in most cases, nobody wants to have an unpleasant conversation and tell you that, well, you're misaligned, and in 6 months we think that we will, not have this team, or not, it's not working out. Process breaks often. So as a product manager, you generally have, program managers and engineering managers to support you, but process breaks constantly, even if it's not your problem. It's directly not your job, but as the product manager, you own the entire delivery aspect of it. And process breaks because people go on vacations, team change, there are reorgs announced, and people just don't follow that Scrum process and Agile process, and that becomes also your job to make sure that that happens. And finally, if you are in any kind of organization, it's not just you doing your job and getting your feature or product built. You are probably dealing with 5-6 other teams, and that is the matrix that you have to build peer relationships, and people have to want to work with you and like you. Otherwise, the product and the feature doesn't get built. So all of these things are challenges that you should be aware of as you transition into the product role. But the question is, how do you transition? The first thing is, if you are in any kind of situation, the very simple thing that you can do is be prepared. And by being prepared, I mean when you go to a meeting, when you interact with people, you ask thoughtful questions. So an example from my story is, I used to work for Adobe, and we had a remote team in India and Romania. And there was one engineer, one QA person who was on the team, and we had like 15, 20 people on the calls mostly. And most of the time she'd keep quiet, but every time she'd ask something, it would be very pertinent. She had thought through it would thought through and make me think about what to do next. And a year later, when it came, somebody asked me whether they should promote her or move her into a role that she wanted to have. I was like, yeah. Like managers and other folks remember people who ask thoughtful things, who are prepared, who are on time for meetings. People notice that things, and you can just do that, and that will get you in the one step closer to being where you want to be. The second thing is demonstrate leadership. You might be in sales and customer success and program management and wherever you are. If you are the kind of person who can deliver, who can execute, and when you say something, it gets done, people notice that. And product management is all about leadership, all about delivering on things, and that becomes a pretty key factor when you are getting evaluated, to be in that position. The third thing, and I think this is a thing that a lot of people mistake, is they make a mistake because they get in love with the product or the technology or the team that they're working on. One of the key things about product management is that you want to move into a fast-growing part of the business. If you can sense that maybe your VP or your GM quit, or the size is shrinking, or you're in maintenance mode and such, and you aspire to be a product manager, the chances are that won't happen. Even if you're being promised by your leadership to say, in 6 months we'll reevaluate and maybe there'll be a position. It's likely not going to happen because the business isn't growing. So your chances to making into product management is to get into a part of the business, or move in, I'll talk about that, or move somewhere where you might have to do a lateral shift and you might have to start from scratch, but that is a chance you have to take. Because if you stay in a place which is not growing, if not creating new products, and those people who are in those positions, continue to stay there, then the chances that you get the opportunity isn't there. And then finally, it's about relationships. So you want to build relationships, and when I say build relationships, it's not about following somebody or saying whatever somebody does because they might give you a job someday. But there are certain cues that managers and leadership people in leadership roles will give out. So they might be at lunch with somebody and they'll say, "Why don't you give me that? Send me that link or that deck that you showed or presented the other day." And if you take these small cues and follow up on those things, like somebody asked you something and you just delivered it, as if that was, it was important. It was important to them, that's why they asked you. And if you do that, it will remember that this is a person who will deliver for me, however minor it might be. And those things carry a lot of weight when you are being evaluated maybe 6 months, a year from now. So relationships, most people who are not looking for followers. They don't want people to just follow them for the, just to create this entourage. But they do want, they are responsible for execution. Product managers are responsible for execution. So they want to hire other people who listen to them. If they tell them to do something and there is agreement, then they actually deliver on that. And that is how you execute on a product. So you want people who generally listen to you. And finally, presentation. And by presentation, I don't mean just like how you dress, but presentation is how you ask. If you are not aligned with the goal of your company, goal of your product, if you generally don't like your management or what they are doing, chances are they think the same about you. They also believe that you are somebody who's an antibody, and they are not going to. So you can't have a split personality. You can't say that I sort of don't agree with what this team or this leadership is doing, but I still want a job and I want to transition product in this kind of role. So you're better off moving into another company or another place where there is, you are aligned with that strategy, with that goal of that organization. So in summary, you can start very simple no matter where you are. Be prepared, demonstrate leadership, be proactive about it, transfer into a fast-growing part of your own business, or take a lateral shift into another company which is growing, where you want to be, where you are aligned. Because chances, if you are in any kind of role, a program owner or a program manager, a product owner, and you apply for product manager jobs across to another organization, it's just not going to work out. You want to go laterally to another place which is growing, and then build your relationships, build your competency around there, so that when there is an opportunity, you can move in. That's the safest. It is also safe for you because you know the domain, you know the people around, you know the culture. Because if you just go into another company as a product manager where you don't know these things, it can be pretty hard situation for you yourself. The second thing I want to talk about is Rocketship PM, and there is a lot of product management is at these does anybody know what this acronym stands for? It's recently become very popular. It's like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. So these are companies that are rocket ships, where product management is a top-down culture. They understand the value of product management. They are making so much money because they do that. And most of the people who get invited to talk about product management belong to many of these companies, for good reason, because they've launched all these exciting products that everybody wants to use, so people want to learn from them. The problem is that the rocket ship, a lot of it that they are doing is because of the rocket ship culture that these companies already have. And because of that, they get propelled, and it's all over the place. But that is not true for many of the companies that are getting there. They're in the process of getting there. Culture is an important part of the success of a lot of product managers at these companies. And it's not limited to just these 5 companies. There are other companies that are also doing well, and there are companies that, there are pockets of innovation even in companies that are, trying to get there. And product management is an impact job where, perception is reality. There is no, that if people believe that you're doing a good job, you're doing a good job. It's like the CEO of a company or a president of a country. If they don't believe you're going to do the job, then you're going to get a one-on-one with your manager pretty soon. So big companies, this is a quote by Jeff Bezos a few years ago, but big companies that are getting to be, innovative, getting there, obviously over time become risk averse, and transitioning in a culture which is, not giving you the entire freedom to go do product discovery, do these MVP prototypes, etc., becomes much more of a challenge. And if you're working in any of these organizations or small BUs, sometimes the strategy and the roadmap and customers is so obvious, and the need to execute is so critical that if you go in and start saying that we should first look at all the customers and we should stop development or something, you might be taken as an obstructionist or somebody who really hasn't been in any of the meetings on the strategy and the roadmap to understand that this is an obvious thing we need to do. There is tech debt, and we are doing this 2-year project to clean up this tech debt. There is no other, it's just very obvious. So, and then there is the other thing about transitioning into product management that you start to think about is frameworks. You go to, you learn about frameworks. But in like 20 years of doing this, I've never been to any meeting where any VP or any director of product has ever talked about, a presentation that has been based on some framework, like a Kano model or something. Like frameworks are only there to make sure that you don't miss out on certain things. Frameworks are not going to tell you how to come up with an idea. You have to have an idea, you have to have a hypothesis, you have to have some data, and then you put a framework on this to see whether you're missing something. But learning frameworks is, probably not the way in which you will convince somebody that what it takes to product management, but it's the other way around. You have an idea, then apply your frameworks. The thing to do if you want to get in is, and this is what also is think about a usual thing in an unusual way. even if it's a small thing. Most of the companies, you look at Uber, there were many companies before Uber who tried to do what Uber tried to do, and they failed. There was a company called Flywheel, but they weren't as successful as Uber, because at Uber they thought about the demand was there, but there was no supply. And they figured out a way on how to create supply. And they looked at a usual problem in an unusual way. Airbnb, another, thing like that, another company like that, where they looked at a usual problem, which the hotels and other people have been trying to solve for 50 years by making more hotels and cheaper hotels and segmenting the market. But they came up with an unusual way which disrupted the industry. So as a product manager in today's times, when competition is so fierce, the way to convince somebody that you are up to the job, you can do it, is not through frameworks, but to think of something in an unusual way, which seems like counterintuitive to begin with. This is also sometimes called thinking through first principles. Is you don't assume that if something has been successful, it is going to be successful, but you think from first principles. And to start doing this, one of the things is to start reading about whatever topic you're interested in. You have some conversation, read a few books, read a few blogs. Twitter is a great place to learn any topic that any thought leadership on any topic. You do a few conversations with some of these people. You start doing something. You start making something. And as soon as you start making something, writing something down, blog posts, becoming a thought leader by posting on Medium and such, you synthesize this information and you start becoming that domain expert in that place. Whether it's gaming, whether it's agriculture, whether it's anything that you're passionate about. So my 3 things about how to be a great PM is identify your culture. If you're trying to transition, don't just go and announce to the world that you're now changing, you're now operating on a different model. Identify your culture and work within that culture, and make sure that it happens. The second thing is, instead of working on frameworks, understand the psychology of users. Like if you haven't taken a psychology 101 course, it is much more in today's times useful to understand how people behave, how they react, how you convince people. A large part of product management is also about persuasion and awareness. Your colleagues, so you need to understand what the dynamics of your company are. You need to be able to persuade people to do that, and the psychology plays a large part. No framework is going to convince other people to listen to you. I think as other people today have spoke about. And the final thing is, is start with data. Because of the competition, because of how many things are happening and how much data is available, to make your decision more informed, to make somebody else agree with you, you need to be, you need to lead by data. Finally, I'd say that if you are in wanting to transition and you have that desire, the one thing, your biggest risk might be that you're moving too slowly. So if you're there is hope, you can do it, so go ahead and do it. Thank you. Any questions or?
Yeah, please.
I know.
We've got time.
Okay. Go ahead. Absolutely. So before, so the question is, are you happy with being a product manager? So before I did move into product management, it was quite a winded path for me. I was doing sales. I was doing technical sales for a small company, a reseller, and I was doing well. I was making good money. It was technical sales. I understood the product, but I had this burning desire that I want to be this product manager. I want to own something. And even though I could have continued on my path, I switched, and I have been happy to be a product manager ever since. Thanks. So I think all backgrounds are, so the question is it better to start with a technical background or a non-technical background? Like I said, there are two ways to get into it. One is a technical background. So a technical background has a very set path. You're a technical owner, you know some parts of it. You just want to find a place where there is a fast-growing business need, where most product managers want to hire people with technical backgrounds in their, within the company, in their ecosystem, because they understand the culture, they understand the domain, they understand the technology. And many companies incentivize product managers to hire from within. They don't want somebody from the outside who doesn't know how it operates to really be successful. But you need to do the kinds of things that I spoke about to demonstrate leadership that other people notice you and say, well, if this person is put in this position, they'll be successful. So you cannot be, you have to sell yourself. You have to demonstrate that you have that desire. You have a desire to understand the business, participate in the business, because it's not a job where without initiative, you will be given that job. People are looking, and if you're a domain expert, if you're non-technical and you're a domain expert in anything, you want to stick with it. Your role or your goal cannot be that you want to be a product manager for Facebook newsfeed or Google YouTube. If you never use Facebook or you never go to YouTube, you're not going to be successful because your engineering team will have much more insight in what to build next than you would. If you're not a gamer and you want to work for Zynga or Huge, these guys have already they're releasing one game every day or 1 week. They know so much about it. As a product manager, you're a thought leader. So unless you've played, I think like there was somebody in the audience who said he was a gamer. If you are that person and you know everything about what works for gamers, then you have everything that is valuable to Huge, because you are an actual person that can say no to certain things that won't work. Because as a consumer, a user of that particular technology or service, you know that you have 25 friends over 25 years, and that doesn't work, or that has been done in the past by some other companies. And that is what a product manager is: domain knowledge, user experience. If you don't use that product, then chances are you'll have a job, but it'll be a short-lived job. Even if you make it, it won't last too long.
I got a question. What you can advise to the product managers who are gonna join the company? For example, this company is in the transition process, and the product manager, for example, the developers has got a bigger knowledge, experience that the product manager has got. I mean, domain knowledge, and there is a big problem because the product manager is a new person and need to convince the whole company, the team, where are we going, what is the strategy, what's gonna be next, how this transition gonna has got impact on a company, etc. Yeah, some kind of these questions. Yeah.
So let me try and summarize what you're asking. You're saying that the company itself is in transition.
Yes.
In terms of,
yes.
That is what I talked about Rocketship PM, right? So when you hear talks from Google and Facebook and other such product managers, where there is absolute, so what is a successful product roadmap? A successful product roadmap has to be aligned with the goals and objectives of the company. And Facebook has a clear goal and Google has a clear goal, and they have some misses, like Google says connecting the world, and then they made Google Plus, which is a complete failure because it was not connected with Google Plus. But some of these companies that are doing really well, they have that alignment at a high level. From the top down, they are enforcing that. And therefore, it's much easier to join. So they have a very straightforward recipe. They get people from MIT and Stanford and Berkeley, young folks, and they put them in product manager roles, and they have this whole structure where you will succeed. As it is, I was talking to a venture capitalist, a couple of weeks ago, and they said before we invest in a product manager from Google, we tell them to, forget everything that they know, because working in a rocket ship company is not the same as working with, outside of it. So in your particular situation, identifying the culture is an extremely important step. Because if the company is in transition and the strategy is not clear, and people are asking each other, like I used to be at Yahoo. For 4 years, they had 5 CEOs, and it was not clear what the strategy of Yahoo is. Is it a media company? Is it a tech company? That was a daily conversation amongst people. So as a product manager, what do? Do you emphasize technology? Do you emphasize media? Do you know what's going on? Because it's all over the place. Somebody says this and somebody says that. In that thing, it is very hard. You have to do a micro focus. Find somebody who knows what they are doing, and they are well funded. They are growing. So you can grow with the business. You can demonstrate that you did, take something from here to there. So you want to, shut out the noise, because if you start thinking big, like I'm going to do this, and the company is in transition, they are getting acquired by somebody else. One of the biggest things in startups, like I used to work at a startup where I was on the exec team. We had a 6-person team. And at one time, I was head of product, and we had other people. One time, I went to the CEO, and I told him, if you're trying to sell the company, you need to tell me. Because he would come and tell me to change my roadmap based on whoever he was trying to sell the company to. So that was a very difficult job as head of product, where you're trying to do something, you looked at the customer and this, and suddenly it's like, instead of financials, let's focus on healthcare. I said, did you find somebody that will acquire us in healthcare today? And 3 months down, those negotiations fell flat. So now, okay, we are back to financials. So you have to identify where you're playing. You cannot become a product manager or do well in that job when you are not aware of the macro situation. So in that role, it's hard to take some of these ideas, and you have to identify the culture, or you have to move to a place where either you find some manager, somebody who can protect you, who can give you that cover for 6 months to do something, which is, everybody's, there are pockets like this in every organization, or you move to a place where it's possible to do, where they are building this culture top down. It's not going to be an easy transition to product management, just as in life, right? In a career developments, almost everybody's in transition. People who are, directors want to be VPs. It's a tough jump. People who are CEOs want to be, CEOs of bigger companies. And it takes time to do that, because there are competent people all over the place. So yeah, it's a personal situation. Happy to talk in depth with yours. But that's my main point, is like, don't just get frustrated because you want something that's not happening. There are reasons that's not happening.
Okay, thank you.